You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I got Brad Hunt here with me. And today's podcast is with Mike Mutzel. And Mike he owns High Intensity Health on YouTube, the YouTube channel.
Yep.
He's Metabolic Mike on Instagram. Mike hunted with Ryan and I, 4 years ago now, maybe.
Yep.
He is a fitness, wellness, health.
Yeah. So I never had actually met Mike. You know, I've talked to him through Instagram and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, at the Western Hunting Summit, his daughter Nez and him were up there, and I got to shoot both days with Mike, and just incredible. Like, he's a genuine guy, but his knowledge base on health and fitness is
unsurpassed.
Yes.
Like I think he and Hillary met through doctor stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing about Mike is he genuinely wants to understand the human body and all the ins and outs of it, and he's just a truth teller.
Yep.
He's just going to tell it like it is. And on this episode, I wanted to pick his brain. I wanted to get inside that man's head and figure out, how can I optimize my performance? This is a selfish podcast, really, for me. Like, how can I get even healthier and more fit? What is Mike doing lately? Because we all go through a fitness evolution at times.
Yep.
And as an older athlete, I'd like to know, what is he doing to biohack things and get himself to an elite level of health and fitness. So we get into some unique things. We talk about light, I think. Circadian rhythms,
sleep, and how it affects your sleep.
Fasting.
Yep. Doing cold plunges.
Okay. Since I did this podcast with Mike, I've been doing the cold plunge thing every day without fail. And there's nothing that I look forward to the least and that I hate more than a cold plunge. I hate it beyond hate. I'd like to change my attitude on it, but it's pure misery for at least 2 minutes or 3 minutes or longer. And then even afterward, it's so funny when I come out of a cold plunge, and that's why I do them later in the evening. I work out a little bit later in the day, because once I work out and once I cold plunge, my body's jello. I'm so relaxed, it's just sleepy time.
Yeah.
I can't function after that. It's not something I'm doing in the morning, because I'd be shot.
No.
And cold plunges, you'd think that adrenaline and stuff would wake you up, but a long cold plunge, extended period of time, actually causes the nervous system to relax.
Yeah, and I could see doing a 30-second cold plunge in the mornings. I think that's what Mike does too.
Yeah.
Is a morning quick plunge. He doesn't do it minutes at a time.
The time I saw Ryan at his weakest, Lampers, just soul crushed him. We had done this 6-hour, 7-hour hike with heavy packs, got to the end of the hike, and it was a hot, hot day. And Ryan's face was purple. He doesn't handle the heat that well. Not like I do. I thrive in the heat. And he decided to just cold plunge deep into this river. He goes in deep in the river, comes out, and it's just refreshing. Within 15 minutes, everything shut down. Legs, muscles, cramps, sore and tired, just weakness, felt like puking. And he told me that on the death hike, a bunch of guys did that with the XO dudes, and they did the same thing. And everyone who did the cold plunge got wrecked going into the rest of the hike as they continued on. It does something to you. It's a positive thing, but the timing needs to be done right.
Right.
And anyway, we get into these kind of discussions with Mike, and it's just really useful. It's just a great discussion.
Yep.
So we recorded this at the Western Hunting Summit, and along with all the other people who attendees and speakers, it was just a wealth of information there that Ryan and Hillary afforded us. Before we jump into the podcast, I want to tell you about a huge giveaway we're doing. You can win a PSE bow. You can win a dozen Black Eagle arrows, a Leupold rangefinder.
Yep.
We've got an initial ascent backpack,
Peaks trekking poles,
headlamp, gators. We've got a number of products that are in this giveaway. And between now and July 1st, if you use the code GRITTY at Mountain Ops, each time you use it, you are entered to win the prize package. But also, you get 30% off when you use the code GRITTY right now. Between now and July 31st, you get 30% off at Mountain Ops, and also you get free shipping.
Yep.
So it's kind of a no-brainer.
Go stock up before hunting season.
Yeah, go stock up. And
there's new flavors of Ignite.
And it's not just the supplements. They've got merino wool tops, hoodies, and stuff that I wear all the time. They got gym shorts that I wear all the time. They got a lot of workout clothes. They got apparel. So check that out. Use the code Gritty over at Peaks. The season is upon us here very soon. Yep. Get yourself some sissy sticks, trekking poles. The Elites are my favorite.
We're going to return the favor.
Headlamps.
Going to return the favor of Brian Call here.
We got sheep feet, insoles. Like Brad, you've had yours for how long now?
About a month-ish, a little more.
And your thoughts on the sheep feet?
Love them.
Orthotics?
Love them.
Such an excellent product. Use the code Gritty over at Sheep Feet. Save over there. Use the code Gritty at Initial Ascent Backpacks. I love mine. Dark Energy battery packs. Get yourself a Poseidon Dark Energy pack. Use the code Gritty over there. Graxaw. We got Stealthy Nutrition. Mm-hmm. I've been pushing hard the CBD Sleep Aid gummies. Yep. They're right here. I love these. But also their krill oil and their E-Charge. I think they're going to have sample.
They're supposed to be
travel packs.
Yeah, soon. Little trail packs.
Packs. Yeah, that's right. For the backcountry backpacking stuff. So.
Yep.
Check all that stuff out. But right now is that big giveaway you just have between now and July 31st, and then it's over. So big push for the next couple of weeks. Anyway, that's it for today. We're jumping into the show. Enjoy this episode with Mike. Thanks for tuning in. Stay gritty. All right, folks. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call. And today I am joined by my guest, Mike Mutzel.
Brian, great to be here.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm Mike, this podcast is way overdue. We've been friends. I first met you on a hunt with Ryan Lampers and James Sylvester. And we were hunting deer. And it was one of your first hunts. We hunted 7 days, or was it?
I think I was in there for 8
days?
It was at least, 7, 8 days,
Might have been, yeah.
Well, you guys went out to it, a little bit longer than me.
Yeah. It was a shocker. Well, we had a couple of deer that we were kind of going for, but didn't work out. But you were quite curious about the experience, and new to it.
Yeah.
So today I wanted to get your perspective from someone who hadn't grown up doing it, and how did you even get interested in it? How has that progression caused you to be here, which is at the Western Hunting Summit that is put on by Ryan Lampers and Hillary Lampers, a stealthy hunter. Here we are, and you're learning year over year, and now you're a hunter yourself, and I want to hear about that. First, how'd you get into it, and then a little more about the journey.
Sure.
But before that, even, I think quite a bit of our audience has probably been informed on what you do and who you are. There's a few who haven't. Tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do.
Yeah. So to make a very long story short, I have a master's degree in nutrition. I've been in this space since 2006, and in the space, in the sort of clinical nutrition type setting, I used to work with a medical doctor in Colorado and work with overweight, sedentary people and things like that. And then, I started a podcast called High Intensity Health in 2014. And so, I've interviewed, been blessed, like yourself, many sort of opinion leaders in the low-carb, ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting space. I wrote a book called Belly Fat Effect and things like that. So, I'm just super endlessly fascinated with regards to metabolism, metabolic health, and longevity now, and all of that. So that's sort of the background. But
it's wild because during the what do we call this thing? During the pandemic, the COVID crisis, whatever we want to say, there's very few people who are willing to report the truth, really, or report an opinion contrary to the state narrative. You, on the other hand, were pretty very, very open. You were very respectful about it. Your podcast during that time were incredibly well done, thought out, and just data driven. It's like you're just presenting the facts and stepping away. But you pissed off a lot of people. Yeah. Especially in the medical space. I was reading comments from people, peers and such, and I'm like, wow, these people are so afraid or so tied to some idea. It's insane.
Yeah, the dogma and the ideology, and that we're basically sitting ducks and we can't do anything. We all have to just use hand sanitizer and masking and stay in our homes. And everyone overlooked the fact that pre-existing health and exercise was dramatically reduced the odds of even getting infection and getting seriously ill or dying. So, by now, it's funny, even like Bill Gates was on, I don't know if it was MSNBC or ABC, but he even said, well, it seems that exercise matters and that this is, sort of a disease that primarily affects, older people with comorbidities. But when I said that very same thing in March of 2020, it was like everyone went after me for saying what was obviously true in the peer-reviewed research. So it was really weird that, if you said anything, especially in that early part of 2020, about the fact that, hey, the data is clearly showing that this particular virus, not all viruses do this, but this particular virus seems to disproportionately impact people who don't exercise, who are overweight, who have high blood pressure or diabetes. So why are we closing the gyms? It's like, that makes no sense. Yeah, you can go to McDonald's all day long.
Right.
So that
you even get like free donuts if you get a vaccine,
Now we know, actually, what's interesting, data has come out, like people who are overweight and smoke, even after they get any one of the vaccines, whether it's Pfizer, Moderna, or Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca, they do not have the protective increase in antibodies. So everyone thinks, I don't need to exercise. I just sit in my house for 2 years. Then I get the vaccine and I'm good. You're like, well, actually, your immune system is so screwed up from all the inflammation that you've created as a result of your lifestyle, and that vaccine is not going to be as effective. So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Right.
And yet we didn't hear that from all the people who cared so much about our health, and it just irritated me. So that's why I put out content that,
No, it's great. And the thing is the truth is we have a epidemic of cowardice in our country, in the medical field especially. Medical, mental health, in those areas. I see it in the gender theory stuff. We're getting a little off track, but I just got to say, since when did chopping off perfectly good functioning parts of the body become the solution to a mental issue, and what I just see how the medical industry has become. It's like there's a track over here that's just gone off the rails, and then there's a track over here in the naturopathic way, and like the sort of stuff that you engage in and Hillary does, where I'm like, there's sense here and health and wellness, but they're not together at all. Like this whole affirm everything camp is it's crazy. Even Dr. Corey up here, he was talking yesterday about somebody asked a question about, well, why doesn't, it was a joke kind of, but why doesn't the medical industry do this thing, and it's really political. There's money driven. There's so much in that big pharma stuff that's going on that we don't know about, that really dictates public health in so many ways. You shouldn't be marrying the power of the federal government to the medical industry.
Yeah.
It's pretty intense. So that's your background. I think, people, if you haven't seen Mike's channel, you need to go check it out on YouTube. You crush me on views and numbers and
down, man. Yeah.
You've been in the game a long time though.
Yeah.
On the YouTube front, you have great videos. I send them to my friends all the time, especially during that period of time. I was like, Mike said it better than I could ever say it in a very diplomatic and professional way. Prior to that, though, prior to the COVID, you threw some Molotov cocktails into the whole BLM and stuff too, which I thought was great. I'm from Oregon, so you did a couple impersonations of some government officials that were just gold.
Yeah.
And those also got a little heat. There are some people not happy about a little bit of mockery. But the problem, the reality is they're just mad about the truth.
Yeah, or they don't want to. Here's what I've come to figure out: is people don't want to accept that maybe we're being lied to, or that powers are steering a narrative to influence votes or things like that. And so I think And I had that realization during COVID and during all this sort of stuff. It was like, wait a minute, the governor of Washington State didn't know, yet we knew that there was an occupation of the Chaz Chop, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. He was asked on live TV, do you know that this is going on? He said, no, I have no idea. Yet everyone on Twitter knew. So just seeing his face and the body language, and I was like, man, this is really, we're being lied to on all these different levels. So that was frustrating.
Yeah, if you read a book like 1984 or The Gulag Archipelago, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, you realize, like, where there's power, there's a tendency toward corruption, period. And the best way to manage against that is to keep the power as limited as possible and allow people the freedom to choose for themselves, give them information. And what you're seeing is a slow erosion of freedom replaced with governing bodies, tailoring messages and sort of, for lack of a better word, brainwashing the public. And like you said, I think there are a lot of people who simply want it to be true that the government is like daddy taking care of them. I read a book recently, F Your Feelings, by Ryan Muncie. And in there this one was Atomic Habits. And in the book he talks about these statistics where they go in and they test people to find out, you have 30 or so people in a room, and 75% of them agree that something is true. What do the other 25% do? Generally, they go along with it. But then they have like some 80% of the people. There's 20% absolutely know that this is the color red. This is red on this car they're looking at. But they have 80% of the people in there lie about that. They are in on it, but the other 20% are not. And they say, no, it's orange. And sadly, the other 20%, almost all, except for like 4 to 6%, something like that, will just agree with the crowd so as not to look weird or they doubt themselves perhaps, or they didn't really identify the exact reason for it. But regardless, the results are, if 80% of the people lie and say, yeah, it's orange, everybody's orange, then the other 20% are left with the problem going, we are severely outnumbered. Am I wrong? Could 80% of these people be wrong and I'm right? That doesn't sound right. You kind of go with the herd, you go with the group, and when the group is wrong on something, generally that's a good, I think in society, you hear Peterson talk about this. I think generally that's a good thing. That you have people saying, no, I don't think it's a good idea if you do X, Y, Z, like drive 100 miles an hour in a side-by-side on a dirt road, maybe you don't do that. There's such a consensus around it that everybody generally goes, that's probably right. Or you hear something racist or sexist or out of someone, and society comes down and says, yeah, that's not okay. You can't just hit your wife. You can't beat her. Sorry. And the person who had some wrong think can correct it because so many people, because shame is a great tool. And today, the problem is, I think the 80% are wrong on so much. So then it takes a certain personality type. Like I said, 4 or something percent would say, no, it's red. It's the color red. And I don't care how many of you try to tell me that that's orange. I know it's red, and I'm not going to lie. I'm gonna, and then they get ridiculed, mocked, pressured in this test. They try to lie to them, and but there's just a few that won't go along with it, which tells you that most people and most human beings they just go the path of least resistance. They're gonna agree to get along, and it takes just a few types of people to say, no, I won't do that. And unfortunately, sometimes that's a real minority, and then your country and your communities go downhill fast, And so that's just to say, I appreciate the fact that you stick your neck out and you do it. I try to do the same thing. I just tell people what I think. I don't care if you agree or disagree. I could have 10,000 people say you're wrong, but if I'm right and I know it, I'm like, okay, I'll stand alone, all by myself over here. So it was nice to have you doing the same thing, and then I could share your videos with my friends when I didn't have enough to say. And have you received any apologies or people who have come around to say, hey, Mike, at first I thought, you were an a-hole or you were wrong, and now I'm like, wow, you were so right and I was wrong.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Brian. First of all, the compliments and things, I appreciate that. I have gotten DMs, from a lot of people, and then friends that I'll see at conferences, that are in the doctors and health professionals will come up to me and say, hey, look, I really, I quietly viewed your stuff. I appreciate you saying that, because I couldn't say it because I work at a hospital or I work in a clinical setting, where if I were to have said that, I would have maybe lost my job or this, because everything has become political, and the field of medicine, and you hit on it, has become very politicized. I mean, the American Medical Association just put out this document, and again, this is an institution that purportedly follows science, about how to approach gender-affirming care for especially for young children, and using pronouns in a clinical setting. So how can we, in the same sense, believe in science and understand that we're following, that there's males and females, biologic males and females, and then also call people they, them, their. I mean, it makes no sense to me. So, it's been an interesting journey to see, and I think most people generally agree with the things that you and I are talking about, that a woman is a woman and a man is a man, and that pre-existing health matters, right, that we should exercise. But it's become sort of, there's this victimology and this safetyism mindset where if we say exercise matters, well, what about the people that don't exercise?
Well, what do you think about the Sports Illustrated model cover that just came out with the oversized gal on there? That's a perfect example of what you're describing. Jordan Peterson came out on Twitter, and perhaps without the tact he normally displays, just said, sorry, not attractive. And I don't care how many of you people try to shove this idea down at me. The reality is, health and wellness is attractive, and she's not healthy. That's the point. And you're being gaslit to be told that it's just a lifestyle, Mike. Like the fact that she's overweight, obese to an extent, the fact that that's the case, no big deal. Like, that's just one other way to live. They had some posters down there on the subway in California which said, don't let your heroin abuse, don't let people judge you for your heroin use. It's just another way of life. Like, just embrace it, go on. You're perfectly okay being a heroin addict. Here's some new injection sites. Like this is the sort of thing that the public is told, that people are told. And the fat thing is kind of baffling to me. We all know that when you're bigger, that it's not healthy.
No.
And we also know that it's not attractive. And it's not natural. It's not naturally attractive to someone. So why are we being told that this is an ideal?
It's bizarre. I think it stems from that book, The Coddling of the American Mind, talks about the victimology and the safetyism mindset and this, intersectionality and inclusive, this way of thinking where, if you're healthy, if you're a male, if you're physically active, if you're able, you're privileged. And so we need to include everyone. So what we need to lower the bar of expectations. And, that no greatness has come from that. I mean, imagine if Benjamin Franklin at that time said, "Oh, you shouldn't innovate. You shouldn't create the light bulb. What are you doing? You should just go use a shovel your whole life." What?
Right.
The Wright brothers. Creating flight. Like, imagine if the mindset back then was like, "Oh, that's dangerous. What are you? You shouldn't be doing this. That's offensive to the people that aren't capable of studying birds. We wouldn't have airplanes."
Yeah.
So progress doesn't I think we're in a state of, I think what's great about this in a sense, if you want to look at it as a positive light, those of us who are out in nature, who are exercising, who are reading, who are having great conversations, we and our children in particular are going to excel. And it's going to be very palpable and obvious who is taking ownership over their health and their mindset and looking through the lens of a growth mindset and not falling victim to this victimology crap. And it's okay.
In this victimology, safetyism type thing, and it's like the government uses safety as the tool to strip away freedoms. I'm here. It's like, I need to take your guns away to protect you. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense at all, But yet we get afraid of things like COVID. And then we're like, yeah, do whatever you have to. Force everyone to get a vaccine. Force everyone to inject something into their body from some medical company who may or may not have my interest in mind at all. That's the solution, and just do it, and we're here to save you, and it's for your own good. It's like, that's such a dangerous place to go. And I see that. I look back at, I had my kids listen to a biography on Karl Marx, because at the heart of Marxism is just victimology. And when you read about his life, he's a loser. He is a bona fide loser. Cheats. He comes from a family of some means, but just throughout his life, he just lives off other people. He's a mooch. He gets he sleeps with his maid, gets her pregnant, sends her away rather than face the consequences. Doesn't take care of the child he brought into the world. His other kids he doesn't really take care of, and he writes his Communist Manifesto basically, and does all this stuff. And it's all victim. None of this is my fault. And I have a right to all sorts of things that I didn't earn because. And you read about it and I'm like, this man was a loser. My kids are listening to him like, this is his life. This is who people ascribe to a degree. They think he's something other than what he was. They don't even know the history of the man. And when you realize what he wrote was so weak and pathetic, and his life mirrored what he believed, and you realize this philosophy doesn't take you anywhere. And at the end of the day, you're just preying on the weakness of humanity, a weakness in a person who wants to quit and give up and blame someone else. And when you have a whole society convinced to do it, and you do it little by little through telling them, we're here to help you, it's messed up.
It is. But
so getting back to your story, you're involved in health and fitness and doing all these things. And somehow or another, Ryan tells me on the phone, Mike is coming. Metabolic Mike, he's friends with Hillary and I, and he starts telling me a little bit about you. And I'm like, my first question is, can Mike keep up? Are you sure, Ryan? We're going to do some hardcore. Does Mike have the fortitude to be out there, or is he going to be like, maybe he doesn't wimp out physically, but mentally? Will he be like, look, guys, it's probably time for me to go home 4 or 5 days in when it's miserable. We got a storm and there's
snow.
Yeah. And he's like, no, I think we're all good. I think we're all good. And sure enough, we went and did it, and you crushed it. And you and I were sharing a tent together. And we had a few stormy nights, and the wood stove was glorious.
Oh, my gosh. That was amazing. Game changer.
Tell me how that happened and what that experience was like.
Yeah. Well, so in the supplement industry, that's how I got to know Dr. Hillary. I think in 2010 or 2011 was when I first met her at a conference. We would put on these workshops, and we'd have doctors come, and we would teach them about strategies about how to use some of the products that we sold. And then I knew that Ryan was a hunter, and then we did a podcast, Ryan, Hillary, and I want to say it was 2017.
Okay.
And on the show, he was like, yeah, I would love to take you out sometime. I'm like, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
And then so we just stayed in touch on it, and then he invited me on this hunt. And I had no idea what it was like. I knew we wouldn't be drinking Bud Light out of a truck, but I also didn't think we'd be sleeping on snow at 8,000 feet. So but I was prepared for anything.
Yeah.
Like growing up, I had older stepbrothers who were really hard on me and beat the crap out of me, and we did hard stuff together. I learned a lot from them. So we would race motorcycles and build forts and tree houses and go camp and all that. So I was comfortable with that. But man, that was it was intense for sure. That especially that particular hunt. But I learned so much. And then having sleeping in the tent with you, sharing that, we had our little routine. I would set up the stove, you'd set up the tent, and man, coming home like. That was part of the fun of it. Like coming home was so easy. I remember just like, I flip on the light. Oh, I turn on the water. It's hot. Like I learned so much. And, but because I didn't have, we saw animals, we didn't actually stalk or pursue an animal.
Right.
So that my first time doing that was this fall. And now I get it, like the adrenaline rush and seeing the animal and getting close and blowing a stalk. I'm like, oh my gosh, I get it. Why this is a lifestyle.
There's something about it that's primal in your DNA. It's hard to describe, but if you have the health and the wellness to get after it, and you get within bow range, or you try to, and the adrenaline kicks in, I don't think there's anything, because I see ex-Navy SEALs coming home and kind of bored a little bit, UFC fighters, and people who had some pretty intense, adventurous, and also just adrenaline-filled type of lives up until a certain point, and then they come back to your normal civilian life, let's say, and they struggle sometimes with purpose or direction or challenge. And I see a lot of them gravitate to hunting, and when they're in range of an animal for the first time with a bow that they've worked really hard at shooting and learning, and that's a skill, it's not easy, and then to hold that, to be able to just sneak in there that close and then pull off that, you realize you're against, millions of years of evolution. That animal has a skill set. And here you are, the coddled American mind, trying to find your primal self and get in that moment. And I see these guys find for the first time, since they get out of some other lifestyle, like they gravitate to it right away. And I've heard a lot of them say, when I'm getting shot at, when this happened or when that happened, it felt different. Like hunting an animal and being in bow range has a certain adrenaline factor that nothing else has. And I think it does have a unique physiological effect on you as a person. I also think when you're in range like that, you tell me, but nothing enters my mind except this moment. Like all the senses have to be directed in this moment, or you get distracted and thinking about your emails. They just don't come into your head.
Right. Yeah, it's almost like a flow state. So I think, there's some books on flow in this, and when you're doing, there's high risk and high consequence activities like mountain biking in Moab, where you're on a ridge, or high consequence, like if you step on the stick, like the elk is going to hear you and just bolt, right? So you're very, like you said, you're attuned, you're in a flow state. So, and that adrenaline, and that creates a unique, I think there's beneficial neurologic properties linked with that, because most people don't have you drive your car to work, you stop by McDonald's for dinner, you come home and you watch TV. There's no consequence. There's no sort of, you don't have to perform at your best in that sort of scenario. So I think that's the attraction and the draw, what keeps people coming back year after year and putting themselves in these harsh environments, to get that 30-second or 40, whatever it is, like that one moment, So I think it's amazing.
It's a little strange when you think about it. 10 days of suffering for that moment. And all year, a lot of us think about it and practice and train for it. It gives us some motivation to put in that extra work to be in shape, because we know that we're going to be somewhere remote and unforgiving, and we need the physicality to handle that. It's like signing up for a race.
Yeah. Tough Mudder or whatever.
Yeah. And you're like, that race is in 6 months. It's like, you don't want to be hurting up there during the race, and it's sort of this motivation that gets you to stay disciplined, having done it now, a lot of times I wonder if someone goes out, does it once or twice, and then they're like, this just is too hard. Or some people get out there and they get in their own head and they think to themselves, what's the point? This is too hard. Or, there's lots of things that creep in, and people, some that go for it, they either like, this isn't what I thought it was, and they back out. You didn't do that, What do you think that is attributable to?
Well, honestly, I think, and I realize in hindsight how fortunate I was to be able to go with you guys to sort of just see, okay, how much time you have to spend glassing.
Well, you watched an epic fail, basically, because nobody shot a deer.
Right.
And I probably passed on the best buck I've ever had in my life, thinking it wasn't as good as it was.
On the first day?
Yeah.
Yeah. Eye guards, I know. That was a great year. But I could see how people, and I started to get frustrated hunting in Washington on public land, just trying to get away from people. And, I was 6 miles in, thought I was away, glassing some canyons, saw signs of deer, but wasn't able to see any bucks. And then sun's coming up, and then all of a sudden there's trucks above me, and I'm like, this is, and then I could see guys coming and going on quads, and so I could see how that would be defeating and cause someone to say, okay, I might go pay an outfitter to take me to another spot to learn.
Sure.
So,
which isn't a bad way to go at all, if you have the means.
Yeah.
Right? Because someone's going to be there to mentor you and teach you a little bit along the way. That learning curve is so much quicker when you do get to go hunt with someone who's quite knowledgeable. You can get in that one trip what would take 5-6 years of solo. But there is something. So you think, what else? I mean,
yeah, watching you guys, learning through osmosis, realizing like, okay, this is what it entails to do that, and then to get away from hunting pressure. To me, that is what is going to keep me going. And then having those encounters, and even though I was away, I had some people around me. I went to this spot in Washington, and I was able to see a bear, and I was actually mule deer hunting. And then it was like, oh my gosh, wait. Is that a stump? He was like 2 miles away, but I got him on the spotter, and then spent the whole day chasing him and all that, and that was just so fun. And there was people all around me, but they were just hunting from their truck, So then I started to realize, okay, well, if I was just hunting from my truck, I would get bored and just be done. Like after 2 seasons, your wife is going to be like, what are you doing, dude? You're out here blowing all this money, spending all this time away from the family, and you're just not getting anything. So I could see how people might get in, then just get out. But being able to get away from people and then see those animals and then pursue them. And I learned so much through the failure. I approached him from above instead of trying to go. It was, for me, patience is a problem. Like in life, I'm generally, and my dad's the same way, and I'm not blaming it on that, but I just like to do, go after it, right, and not wait. And I realized, like, okay, seeing you guys glass and then think about it, and then you'll ask Ryan, okay, Ryan, what are we going to do, and then having the patience to spend an extra 30 minutes approaching an animal, a different perspective, will enable you to, I realize, like, I got to be able to have eyes on the animal as opposed to going over these ridges and then like, wait, where was he again? And so it was that to me, because I was like, oh, I'm going to get this bear. This is going to be my first
like
meal.
Many of us did in the beginning. I mean, that's how you get over to the other side and you're like, nothing looks like it did from over there. You just go and you think you're going to find it, and you realize you're 2 ridges over on the other side. Like, it's amazing how you get turned around in your head.
Right.
And then you start to learn, okay, and this time I'm going to photograph the mountain that I'm going to approach. And I'm really going to put a solid plan, unfailable plan. That's the tree I need to get to. And the way I'm going to get to that one is I'm going to get that one first, and then to that one and that one, so I don't get lost, And then you start putting effective stalks together. You're in the same boat as all of us. And the patience thing, that's all of it. At the end of the day, it's methodical patience. There's very few big game hunts, especially with a bow in hand, you don't just run and gun generally, right? It's a we're not used to being as slow as it takes to kill an animal. You know, you look at a mountain lion and how patient it is as it moves in on what it's going to take. And it'll move just like a hair at a time. And then again, and it waits for the wind gust to come and the animal looking the other way, and then it moves and then it stops again. You got to be that predator. And I think once you do it and you start to get closer to that success, the more rewarding all of it becomes. There's something about the slowness where, you know, too often I see guys drive by in a Ranger, you know, in, let's say, Arizona. They hop out, and while the Ranger's running, they just sort of run over and try to get a shot at a deer that they just saw on the side of the road. And that's kind of their hunt. It's not really hunting, you know. It's just shooting. And you're hoping that animal's dumb enough or young enough just to let you walk up on it before it runs away, you know. That's a totally different experience than kind of climbing to a peak, glassing, watching a deer bed, checking the wind, and then making a plan, and then stalking it all day long, inch by inch, over the top of it until you're in bow range. That right there it's a different thing. And like Ryan says, if you do your stalk right, at the end of it, you should be so exhausted. Your back, your legs, everything should be burning and tired and just tired. Because going that slow, inch by inch, is a grueling process. And if you're not fit for it, you do it once or twice, you're spent that day.
Yeah. So for me, I think that's the biggest thing. And then marrying the physicality, the mindset, and then just the love for the outdoors. So I talk like and hopefully I don't have hubris here, but I haven't killed anything yet.
Right.
But having those failed moments and then learning through osmosis from you guys about what to do, what not to do, and how much time it takes has really helped me plan some hunts this fall and hopefully have more opportunities, continue to learn.
Yeah.
And that's what's cool about it, the learning process in and of itself. So that next time you're like, okay, I'm not going to do that. And I feel like I'm starting to build up this mental bank of like, okay, this is where the animals might be. Let's spend some time glassing here. And then if there is an animal, instead of just go straight forward, take a step back, like you said. So
I have so much respect for your journey. I had a dad who took me out, and I grew up in the sticks. Like, we were catching crawdads and snakes and cooking up frogs, like when I was a kid and stuff. And here we are. That was sort of natural. The Boy Scouts trips, the Eagle Scout, all the stuff I did, the adventuring, rafting, like we just did it outdoors was our life. And hunting was our life. Even when I didn't go bow hunting with my dad, I'd go rifle hunting with my uncles, and everybody would go out in the Orange Army and smoke a bunch of deer and bring them back to camp. And I remember deer camp and elk camp, and we do it on horseback in Hell's Canyon for elk. Well, I don't really know anything else different. My hunting changed over the years. It went from, sort of the traditional, your dad and your grandpa and everybody goes out with guns and does a deer drive like in Wisconsin. And then it morphed into what it is today. But I still had it. When I see you just later in life grab onto it and then go and do it often solo, I have tremendous respect for that. It's rare,
Well, I mean, had I not had opportunities like this, like the Western Hunting Summit, and gone with you guys, there's no way I'd be, you'd be emulating what you see, not having a father figure, teach you these things.
Yeah.
What you'd go out and think, okay, I won't even know how to get a hunting license, to be honest. So yeah, I think now with the internet and the podcast, what you guys do, those films, and then summits like this, I mean, this has been invaluable, because
Yeah.
just little conversations that you have, and then just going on the mountain the first couple of years, getting out there, and then glassing with folks and learning from Brian Barney and Cody Rich and all that. That's been super helpful. So
tell me this, you how old are you now, Mike?
39.
39. You discuss fitness, health, wellness. Like, I think the last one of the videos I got onto the other day was thickness of blood. And you were talking about the impacts of that and how it's different than cholesterol and all these other things. There's things that you really dive into that are useful and meaningful that I just don't find on a lot of other platforms. And so I'm fascinated by that, but I'm also fascinated like what you're doing to stay healthy, because you go to some extremes, like light blockers, blue light blockers, and cold plunges and cold baths and different routines. And what I want to know is, as you've gone through all of this, what's a typical day for Mike, and why? What have you done that you've been like? Because you approach things you approach life with so many, your wellness with so many little angles, like we all do. Like we do so many things. It's hard to attribute your wellness and stuff to just one thing. It's a whole bunch. But picture somebody who's average wellness right now. What are some of those things that you would say they should work on, or that they could do that would drastically change their future?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. I think breath is a big one. We can talk about these maybe in little silos or buckets. Yeah. We can talk about basic blood work. I think that maybe we're going to start there. And then sleep and circadian rhythm and light hygiene are big, and then just nutrition. But since you mentioned, because most hunters are male, right? Mm-hmm. It's cool to see a lot more women come into this. And I found with a lot of men, as men, we don't naturally bloodlet. Women have been bloodletting through menstruation for their entire lives. So as men, we tend to accumulate more iron, right? We're eating red meat, which is very healthy. I eat predominantly red meat and butter, and we can get into that later. But so we tend to accumulate iron, and iron can increase our blood thickness or viscosity. And particularly around this COVID-19 era, even now Omicron, like I found, because I donate blood because my blood tends to be a little bit more viscous or thick, which can help you, like in the Tour de France, for example, Lance Armstrong and U.S. Postal and all those guys, during the tour, they would, or beforehand, they would donate blood, and then they would blood bank, and then during the middle of the tour, they would get their own blood re-infused, and that would increase their hematocrit, which would increase their ability to bind oxygen, and deliver more oxygen to the tissues and working muscles. So there's advantages there, but there's disadvantages in the sense that increased iron or your hemoglobin and your hematocrit make your blood more viscous, and that can lead to clots and atherosclerosis, or the formation of heart disease. So I think a lot of men should go out once a year, or at least every 18 months over the age of 35, and just get what's called a Chem 24 with a CBC complete blood count. This is just a basic blood test. Also look at your iron and ferritin. And a lot of guys that I've worked with over the years, particularly people with an athletic background, tend to run a little bit on the higher end of normal.
Yeah, Doc told me 6 months ago that it was on the edge of where he didn't like it to be in thickness, and he wanted me to go and donate blood. And I haven't done it yet.
You should. I mean, I don't know your number. It's just, it's helpful, especially in the off season. You can go and donate. You might notice a little bit more fatigue. I mean, your next workout the next day, but you're young, you're healthy, you're super active. You'll bounce back, but just getting those numbers down a little bit, and you can think about viscous motor oil, versus more a little bit slippery. And so there's all these curvatures in your vascular system, and blood is what's called a non-Newtonian fluid. So it creates this Venturi effect, and that rubbing can create the process of the atherosclerosis, or the narrowing of the arteries. So you get this micro damage, and then your immune system is repairing that, and that creates what's called the sclerosis of the arteries.
I see.
So that's the advantage with that. So I'm a huge fan of just going and donating blood.
Suzanne, she had cancer and she did chemo and she got through all that and she did chelation after that and she did a lot of things to sort of detox and she gives blood every 2 or 3 months because hers is really thick.
Yeah.
And just not quite sure all the reasons why, but it's thick. She has to go in every 60 days or so and just donate a little bit and to keep it right where it needs to be.
Nice. See, most people don't even know that it's thick,
Right.
And they might get symptoms. They might.
And how is it different than what people always hear? Like you've got high blood pressure, high cholesterol. People hear that all the time. And then there's always this, oh no, I need to fix this. How does the thickness of your blood correlate to like these other factors that people are always watching?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of research on iron overload as a driver of hypertension or high blood pressure. So
Okay.
I think there's no money to be made in bloodletting or donating blood. So most doctors would
Right, that's too simple. We can't prescribe you a statin.
Yeah, I mean, and so having been on the sales end of the sort of industry, working with medical clinics or doctors, they're generally well-intended people who go there to help, but they're so busy with insurance reimbursement and charting to make sure that they don't get sued and all this stuff. And so they learn honestly from their drug reps, or they go to a seminar sponsored by a drug company.
Yeah.
And we can look at the opioid crisis as sort of an example of that.
Yeah.
So we don't hear a lot about the importance of donating blood and blood viscosity. We do hear about driving down blood pressure with different medications or lifestyle interventions. But yeah, it's the links with cholesterol and heart disease there's so much nuance there.
Yeah.
With regards to an individual's age, the density of the particles. And so I'm not in terms of a risk factor, if people... The biggest, instead of focusing on cholesterol, looking at your triglycerides is actually much more relevant to what's going on in terms of your cardiometabolic health.
Yeah.
And most practitioners are not focused on your triglycerides. So that's another number that I like to have people look at as opposed to just their cholesterol. Because if you and I go on a low-carb diet, we start exercising, our cholesterol is going to increase. Even our LDL, or so-called bad cholesterol, that's just a function that, hey, we're more capable of mobilizing or moving around fats and utilizing that as fuel.
Yeah.
So we're going to look like, oh my gosh, from a cardiovascular risk standpoint, we're going to look to the average medical doctor. We're going to appear as though we're at higher risk for developing heart disease because of our LDL is increasing. But what will decrease? Our insulin, our glucose, our liver enzymes. Your liver gets infiltrated with fat, and then these liver enzymes start to increase. All of that will go down, and our triglycerides will be the first marker to actually start to decrease, which is the whole medical community is actually pivoting away from LDL cholesterol and more looking at triglycerides.
Yeah, I heard Chris Kresser talk about it years ago. I think it was Chris on like a Paleo Solution podcast with Rob Wolf back in the day. No, I was pretty heavy into CrossFit, and I heard them do this talk, and I couldn't believe the things that I was learning about cholesterol. Now, it's been a while, I don't remember it exactly, but there was something to do with the overall number of molecules versus the size of the molecules, and how the medical industry only kind of looked at one, and it's at least multifaceted to determine whether you're in bad shape or not. And so often people were getting diagnosed with this bad cholesterol when really they're just normal. Their body's just doing what it's doing. It's healthy. And then they're on some medication they're paying money for and has lots of side effects and issues. And those were kind of eye-opening times for me probably 10 years ago when I was really diving into those things and learning about it and thinking, things are not as
kind of clear cut.
Yeah. That's when I was doing more grass-fed. I got off of the seed oils and started, doing fish and omega-3s, and the inflammation I was experiencing as a pretty young man still, like, why is this 60-year-old dude kicking my ass? And we were in the gym, And I was like, I just need, eventually my body will get used to this load, this volume, this stress. I'll get fitter and fitter, and then I'll be able to keep up with, everyone else and then more. At a workout, I beat the 60-year-olds in terms of time that day. But they came back the next day as if nothing had happened the day before. I came back the next day and I felt the day before. And I felt the day before for days, and I just worked out on top of it. And it never sort of subsided. And I'm like, what is it that is I'm doing wrong? And I'm talking to these old guys because they're not feeling it. They're loose, they're limber, and the inflammation was just minimal for them. And they said, we're sitting there having a conversation, and they're like, well, have you read the Primal Blueprint? Have you read the Paleo Solution? Or I'm like, what do you eat? And I'm like, oatmeal, bran, whole wheat muffins, and I have orange juice for that heart healthy breakfast. And I think I got all this menu out of Men's Health. No egg yolks at any cost. Certainly no. It's all chicken because that's better for you. And dude, like everything that I was doing that I thought was in the vein of healthy living, I was completely wrong about. Yeah. And once I read the book and then went back to more of a hunter-gatherer type of diet, carbs went way down compared to how I had been living. Whole foods went way up. And I mean, I was basically replacing whole food vegetables and fruits and such with grain. I mean, the food pyramid, it was all grain. Everything was grain from morning till dark, oatmeal, lots of these whole grains because that's what I've been taught, And so as the scales came off the eyes and I switched my diet over to more of a Paleolithic type of diet, instantly I lost like 38 pounds because I was most I've ever weighed is like 215. And then I got down to 170, somewhere around 175 pounds. Then I experienced the opposite where, because I was almost keto, then I was doing all these CrossFit workouts, and for a while I got better performance, especially strength to weight ratio. I mean, things were awesome. Then I hit this wall of just bonking, no energy, nothing. I just killed all the carbs, all the glycogen was gone, and it took me. Then I started to more eat based on performance. So yeah, it was very paleo most of the time, meats and fats and whole grain, whole foods, and then I'd add in, the post workout, a big giant bunch of rice and carbohydrates and stuff, and I would. If I did those workouts, then I'd smash sweet potatoes and I'd throw sugar on some things, and I just ingest way more carbohydrate. Then the next day when I wasn't working out, it would be very, very hunter-gatherer,
Low carby.
Yeah. And what I started to realize was when I listened to my body as well, that's when I started to really perform well. And then I started doing intermittent fasting a few years ago. So I'll go through periods of, I don't know if you call it intermittent fasting, but basically I won't eat after about 8:30 at night, and I won't eat the next day until 11 or 12, sometimes 1 o'clock, and I'll just set a goal. So my feeding window is just this. And then during that window, I kind of eat what I feel like eating, but there's something about my mind and my body that feels very sharp when I wake up in the morning. And as I starve all day, I only have caffeine usually. And by 2 o'clock, now I'm feeling some hunger. But that changed things too for me. I mean, I felt great. So, that's kind of was my journey. And you mentioned sleep. That was another one. That changed me. That changed me like, wow. I had no idea that I had a problem there. Mm-hmm. One thing I've not done is, you said blue light hygiene or something like that?
Just light hygiene. But getting back, so here's I think a big thing that we get wrong is we'll hear, oh, carbs are bad, like because carbs drive glucose. Glucose will increase insulin. Insulin's bad, so therefore I should go low carb. And I think your story was very similar to mine. You hear about paleo, or people hear about keto, so then they're like, okay, I can never have carbs again. But what you said right there, Brian, I think is important for everyone to understand is you can match your carbohydrates with your exercise intensity or volume. So if you're out in the backcountry carrying a pack for 6, 7, 8, 10 miles, you can afford carbohydrates. So please don't be a hero and try to be a ketogenic zealot, right?
Right.
So having carbs in context, and so applying the carb, matching, your exercise volume and intensity, and you can pair carbs with that. But if you're on a road trip, you do not need, hot potatoes and all these French fries and chips, right?
Coca-Cola.
You're sitting,
Yeah.
And so that's where we get into the problem, where people have too much carbs and they're doing too little physical activity. So I think that's really important for people to understand. But the feeding window aspect, so basically. And I sort of do a little bit different of a feeding window. So within the sort of umbrella of intermittent fasting, there's time restricted feeding, there's alternate day fat, there's all these subtypes. But I think for most people that just want to lose some belly fat or prevent age-related weight gain, just doing time restricted feeding like you're doing is awesome. So starting your feeding window 11, 12 in that ballpark, and then the earlier that you can eat your calories and the earlier you can start your fast in the evening, overall the better it is. So if you can stop feeding within 2 to 3 hours before your desired bedtime, that is linked with increased levels of longevity associated genes, decreased inflammation, and all this. And so I think that's a great way to go, but also think about it too within the seasonality, and that's what hunters understand is, deer or other animals aren't necessarily, like, they'll change with the season. So as we record this, end of June, the days are a lot longer.
Yeah.
So we might have, our last meal might be 9 o'clock, but here in Montana, it doesn't get dark till damn near 11, right? So now in the winter time, you want to be going to bed at 9, right? Because the sun has been set for 4 or 5 hours. So having that ability to modulate your feeding window and approach it in a seasonally contextual manner, I think is really important for people to recognize as well. So.
Yeah, talk about the circadian rhythms that people have, because I assume it's largely hormonal to an extent, but I'm like a bear, dude. Like when the winter comes, like I sleep long hours, especially in the change of season. And I don't have the energy I have this time of year. This time of year, I can sleep 5 hours at night. It's probably not ideal, but I get up and I'm like, okay, I feel good. In the wintertime, if I'm not getting 8 or 9 hours sometimes in a row for days on end, I'm tired. What is that?
Well, I mean, we're meant to adapt to our environment, and that's what's beautiful about recognizing this and realizing that your energy intake should change. You're probably having more calories in the summer. You're more active. And so light and darkness are key aspects of health, and this is being recognized in medicine now, and we should be getting the amount of lux. Lux is a way to quantify the intensity in light. So what is it? It's 740. We're sitting outside. We're probably getting 2,000 to 3,000 lux as we sit here.
Okay.
And we, as humans, we need to be exposed to that morning and bright midday light. It's very important for entraining these little clocks that are working behind the scenes called our circadian clock system. So your eyes are sensing the messages of light. Those are transduced to this suprachiasmatic nucleus in your brain, and that's sending messages to the rest of your peripheral clocks. And so, for example, right now our cortisol should be increasing. As men in the morning, our testosterone should increase.
Yep.
And then as the sun goes down, our melatonin should increase and our cortisol should be down. DHEA should go up. So all these things, this rhythm of life is very important to health and important to metabolic health, and particularly longevity, because that clock system that I just mentioned that's so integrated into every facet of health, it becomes weaker and weaker and sort of muted as we age. Okay. So that means we need to be even more vigilant about morning and midday sunlight and evening darkness. And so staying off the screens, Even, for example, when we are in the tents, in late October, using the red portion of the light instead of that white at night, not looking directly at the phones, all of those things, because we're trying to really optimize. You mentioned recovery in these guys. So the more that we can have this circadian clock system, which is integrated with our immune response and recovery hormones, it's very important to health. I mean, a lot of people have sleep disorder breathing or fragmented sleep, and that a lot of that can be improved by just getting this clock system more in tune.
It's amazing. I do recall, like, we went from, we got our room all blacked out. The little lights from the alarm clocks and digital things and all that blacked out, everything blacked out, curtains blacked out. And when I started doing that, I started sleeping deeply and for a long time, which I found upsetting, I should say, because I had no idea that it was so. I mean, I had gone to sleep in a basement before and had no idea what time it was, and my body slept for like 9 hours straight. You sleep right through the morning, and it's like, whoa, I was way more tired than I thought. But also, you don't realize how much that light pollution is affecting your hormones. And now we've done blackout for over 10 years. When I go to sleep, it's pitch dark. I'll even, if I think there's going to be some light coming in from somewhere, I'll throw the little eye patch over my eyes. I'll sleep so much deeper and so much longer. It only takes, as soon as a light comes on anywhere when I'm asleep, just a little light here or there, my body will wake me up. It doesn't take long at all. If I want an alarm to wake me up, all I have to do is just have a light come on. It doesn't matter what time it is, 3 a.m. Light comes on, I'll wake up within a half hour, probably 15 minutes of that light coming on. So I think people don't realize. I see people sort of have a system where they don't do any of that. They go to bed. They have lights on in the room.
Or TV or something.
TV. They fall asleep. They wake up a few times. They don't sleep deeply. Then they wake up in the morning. This time of year, it's light at 5:15, 5:30, and then they fall back asleep. But all of that is a process that I think people don't realize it's so damaging. And then what happens, I find, is you become a bad sleeper. Like I can't, so many people are like falling apart. The wheels are falling off because they cannot sleep. What a horrible problem to have. Like, I don't have it. There were a few times where I got the more you wreck your sleep habits, the worse it all gets. It's a bad process, because then the next day you're just tired and you feel like crap, and so more cortisol, more stress hormone comes in, and you feel that. And then you go to bed you try to go to bed and you're just too wired. Everything's just too amped up. Everything's like in stress emergency mode. And then you're stressed because you're not falling asleep, and you need to be falling asleep because you need that rest for the next day. And then that just makes you more stressed and makes you stay awake. And it's this vicious cycle. And what I found over the years that worked for me, especially when I was lifting heavy and doing intense CrossFit style workouts, the sleep was critical. Yeah. If I could get a good sleep the next day, I could crush. If I only slept 2 hours and woke up, I was broken. Mm-hmm. And I needed those recovery times. They were very important to me. And yet there were times where I couldn't fall asleep, and I stayed up all night being mad that I'm not falling asleep. Yeah. Those are distant days in the past with my healthy sleep habits today. And I think some of the things I did back then too was add a little bit of melatonin or something like that, especially once or twice a week, just to reset the clock, just to like reset things. It was like it interrupted the stress circuit or the cortisol. And then the next night I could sleep like leftover from the night before. And then when you build on good sleep habits, I just think you start to just kill it, do really well.
Well, it's really important. You mentioned, we talked about LDL cholesterol and heart disease. There was one study that looked at, they stratified people, randomized people to two different arms. One group had a little bit of light coming through the room, just low ambient light. We're talking like 20 to 30 lux. Okay, so this is, your iPhone is putting out about 10 lux. When you're in your room, you want basically 0 to 5 lux, like nothing. And so people can go on Amazon, and I recommend folks do this, like if they're not at the level that you are with the blackout curtains, just to be able to put some language or numbers to the amount of intensity of the light. It's a $29, and even your iPhone has some apps. They're paid apps, but I just got this light meter so that I could really optimize the environment too. Really important for kids, because kids, how their eyes are shaped, they're even more sensitive to this.
Really?
So allowing your kids to be on iPads and iPhones right before bed, really not good. Because what's happening is that light is being transduced or translated into chemical messages, dropping melatonin, changing growth hormone, changing all these things. And then, you wake up and you're like, well, I just crave carbs, right? I just have to have that Starbucks donut.
Yeah.
Part of that is because, well, your circadian rhythm could be screwed up, and leptin and all of this. So getting the environment fine-tuned is just fundamental. But going back to that study, they tracked these people for a year, and it was very simple. Just, hey, look, you're going to have these lights on in the room for a year, no big deal. And then these people had more of a blackout type situation, and there was all these changes in cardiovascular risk factors, not just cholesterol, but they looked at other more sensitive specific markers, and even measuring atherosclerosis. And the group that had just a little bit of low light coming in was presenting themselves as higher cardiovascular risk.
Okay.
So this is unrelated to even diet and cholesterol.
Yeah.
It's like, this is really important. And it carries over. If you want to be a backcountry hunter or do this stuff into your 60s, there's a guy here 73. I mean, if you want to be like that, this is just a low-hanging fruit that we should all be grabbing. And then since I've shared a tent with you, and since we're on the mountain, 2 days ago, in the morning, I heard a lot of people kind of snoring a little bit. How you breathe when you're sleeping is important, because
talk to me.
Yeah,
Talk to me, doctor.
It's so important. I'm not a neurologist, but I've interviewed a few different sleep specialists. Okay, so when we're in those deep phases of sleep, the brain is muting the messages to our muscles, so our muscles become flaccid, essentially. That's part of the repair process. Now, that is a problem if you're breathing through your mouth, because you have this major muscle called your tongue. And if you're lying down, you can envision your tongue losing all of its intervention from the brain. It can collapse in your airway, and that creates what's called apneas.
So I get, when I'm exhausted, I snore like loud, and then so on hunts, but and sometimes my hunting partners will make a comment like to my wife, like, how do you sleep with that guy sometimes? And she's like, you know what? He doesn't do that. Most of the time, he just sleeps quietly. But she's like, if he's really tired, if he just did, some real physical thing, she's like, he will snore, and he'll snore really bad. And I just know, like, I'll go to bed sometimes and say, I'm tired. You're going to hear me snore. Other nights you won't hear anything. So what you're describing is exactly that. It's this exhaustion, which is causing this relaxation. So I'm breathing through my mouth.
Breathing through your mouth. And so,
but is that, how do you, because, I mean, I just go to sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm breathing through my nose when I go to sleep, as far as I know. But then I'm, because usually it's if I'm on my back, which is often when I'm sleeping in the backcountry, because you end up just kind of cuddling and sleeping. It's just how I am.
Yeah, a lot of us are, and so sleep apnea. There's a spectrum of, say, normal breathing, sleep apnea, right? And some of us are right in the middle here. We have what's called sleep disordered breathing, and the problem with that is your sleep is being interrupted by your breathing patterns, and so there's all sorts of solutions and fixes, but I bring this 3M micropore tape with me pretty much everywhere I go. And so essentially what you're doing is you're taping your mouth before you go to bed, and that is in training or fostering breathing through your nose when you're sleeping, so that you're not having these periodic apneic events, and you're getting the oxygen and CO2 exchange that you should be getting.
Interesting.
So
when do you put that on?
Like as we're going to bed, I'll just put it on. Like have one in your...
Do you sleep with it on then?
And at first it might pop off because you're not used to it in the middle of the night. And it's hard if you have facial hair like with you. There's another product called Somnifix that's like the shape of lips. So you can wear, have a beard and all that. But that is a piece of low-hanging fruit this costs $6 and it lasts a month. So a lot of guys should be doing that.
I think that could work wonders, actually. So when what you're saying is when your mouth is closed and you do breathe through your nose, it causes the snoring disappears.
You might still hear a little snoring, but you're not getting that tongue blocking the airway.
And that's what's the problem is the tongue. So the brain, when you're not as tired, for some reason the muscles are keeping it out of the way.
Yeah, potentially, or it could be breathing position, like your bed. You might have a thicker pillow at home, so your head's a little elevated, so it doesn't happen as much. Yeah, that fatigue, all of that. But the problem is when you're having that snoring event, that apnea, your brain is sensing an alarm signal because you're not getting all the oxygen, and you're basically suffocating. And that is linked with heart disease, with cortisol release, stress hormones.
Okay.
The list goes on and on.
Okay.
So
interesting.
This is.
Tell me about breathing, by the way, since we're on this topic, because, I hear Brian McKenzie and Wim Hof and a lot of people talk about breathing through your nose, how important that is. And I've delved into it a few times, and I do try to make a concerted effort to breathe through my nose when I'm hiking and climbing, but I hate it. I hate it. Like, I've been a mouth breather, I think, since childhood. For whatever, I don't think I have the biggest canal here, to be frank. Like, I think it's restricted to begin with, just from genetics. I think I look at some people's nose and I'm like, you have a gonzo there. You have holes like going into your sinus, just huge. And I have this like little porthole right here, and it seems like I have trouble. And I hear there's lots of muscles and things in there that will strengthen over time, but for like a year, I worked really hard at breathing through my nose, breathing through my nose best I could. Of course, when I need more oxygen, I just had to stop, switch it back and forth. After all that effort of breathing through my nose, the Wim Hof, he's like talking about it. I didn't feel a huge benefit from it, and it was terribly uncomfortable.
Yeah. So what to do in that situation? I would say still strive for nasal breathing when you can and things like that, but you don't have to be a zealot about this, and we don't have to breathe through our nose every single waking moment, but you could practice nasal breathing specifically as a way to recover. Maybe after that hard climb, sit down for 5 minutes and really, try to breathe nasally, or after your exercise session, things like that.
A lot of times when I'm running uphill and I'm going a couple miles up, and then when I come down, I'll only breathe through my nose, and I'll get it to the point where I'm going as fast as I can. If I go any faster, I got to open my mouth, and I can run in that zone or sit in that zone for a long time. It's actually a very comfortable pace. That's kind of the sweet spot, is if I'm breathing through my nose, that's the pace I can just go without too much. I'm going pretty quick, but
you can sustain it.
Yep. And so downhill, it's just I refuse to breathe through my mouth the whole way down.
That's a great way to think about it, But I think the take-home message for a lot of people is, if you don't use your nose, it's sort of a use it or lose it. And there's erectile tissue, it's adaptable, there's mucus and all this sort of thing. And so we need to be more intentional about it. And it doesn't have to be 100% of the time that you breathe, because if you're doing an intense, like you're squatting or you're deadlifting 400 pounds, you're going to use your mouth, and that's totally acceptable. But strategically, or just be a little bit more mindful about it, especially as you go to bed. If people are new to mouth taping, in the evening time, it might look funny around family at first, but you can wear this before you go to bed. And that's just a reminder, and that can sort of prime that, what they call, literally, like James Nestor's book, Breathe. It's like erectile tissue, just like the genitals. And we gotta prime that. So that's just, these are simple strategies that most people overlook that can be effective. But getting back to like the Wim Hof style breathing, starting the day with some sort of hyperventilation, followed by retention. And so that's what all the breath work is sort of based upon. You hyperventilate, and then you retain that. And that is like a non-negotiable thing that I do. Like this morning, I just walked down behind the barn because it might sound kind of funny. So you're breathing very intense for about 25 breaths, in, out, as fast as you can, preferably through your nose, the inhalations, and exhale through your mouth. And then you just retain that on the 25th rep for as long as you can. And that retention can really help build up the CO2 tolerance, carbon dioxide tolerance. And that has translative effects when you're hiking, when you're hunting, controlling your breath when you're going to make the kill.
I did that for probably 6 months or so, something similar to that. It was unpleasant, very unpleasant at first, but later on it was easier. And I combined that though with a lot of running at the time, and I definitely feel good. I feel good when I run a lot. For some reason, I breathe clear. I feel good. My whole body feels good. I like to run. I like to, go. I'm not fast, but I like how it feels. And it's all about the breathing. The running forces me to breathe, where a lot of other activities, I don't hyperventilate to the same level. I don't demand oxygen enough. I mean, I can do 100 burpees and it won't, I have certain activities that I can do and I don't suck wind on at all. And then there's activities, like running's one of them, where it really taxes my body's ability to breathe. And it feels good because afterward, I just feel like I'm breathing well, and without it, I don't feel as good. I lost my sense of smell probably 8 or 9 years ago, and it just slowly, gradually, over time, but it really went away, I don't know, 6 years ago. And today, I literally can't hardly smell anything. Don't know why exactly. It just went to some doctors, and they're just like, my family has, and I as well. I had, some allergies that were seasonal. And eyes would itch, and I would cough a lot, especially when I was in Japan for a couple of years. Whatever was in Japan wrecked me bad. And then in Oregon, it was pretty bad, something there. But when we moved to Colorado and Utah, those things went away, gone. But I still can't smell. I wondered if years and years of inflammation from allergies just sort of got a hold of that sense. And it's annoying because, I mean, it's handy when your partner passes gas in a teepee. Like, I can't tell.
Yeah.
But it's annoying when you can't smell, foods and things like that. And it has to be pretty strong enough to be pretty close to it to pick up a scent.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, some things with that. A lot of people are in that boat with COVID and things. Red light therapy, intranasal, like a Juve light, or there's these different. The Hive light from Blue Blocks is a way that it might help wake up that olfactory nerve and things. Yeah. The bulb. So that, I don't know. I mean,
interesting.
Everyone's situation is different, but that could be something to try. Yeah.
I'll look into that. So, taping your mouth, the circadian rhythms, getting sleep, the light hygiene thing. What are some other things that you're doing? The fasting, but what else are you doing that's really, you feel like, is another thing you'd recommend people to focus on?
Yeah, walking after meals is one of the best ways to decrease that post-meal rise in glucose. So just making a habit of going for a 10 or 15-minute walk. Stan Efforting, Mark Bell have been talking about this for a long time. There's a lot of new research showing you take two people, have them eat isocaloric meals, so same macronutrients. One person goes for a walk after, Sally Smith doesn't. Their post-meal glucose levels and insulin are going to be totally different.
I can feel it.
Yeah.
I can feel it because I can either go on a walk, and be a little bit active right after, or I can sit at my desk and just do some computer stuff. And if I'm at my desk on the computer, I want caffeine within 5 minutes of eating, 10 minutes, 20. Like, I want something I'm feeling groggy. But if I just go out and be active, I don't experience any of that. So you're telling me it's not that I'm distracted. There's actually a physiological thing occurring.
Because if you don't move, so your glucose is going to go up, your insulin is going to go up as well, and your blood glucose can go down even further. And there's nothing wrong with a little bit of a blip in glucose, but yeah, you can feel that lethargy. And so we're just able to process the meal a little bit better. Your muscles are these sponges for glucose and insulin. So if you can move those muscles around, the metabolites are going to go there, in the post-meal window. Piece of low-hanging fruit most people don't focus on, right? They focus on the calories or the carbs, but hey, why don't just go for a walk after you eat? It can be 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be a mile. And so getting a dog that can help you get outside, that's super helpful. And then another thing, temperature extremes in both going in a sauna. I know you like heat, you like to get really hot, and then also sort of stress testing the system. And all this is doing is increasing our resilience, which we all need in life, particularly as hunters, because you're going to be stressed. So starting out the day with a cold shower. I love to get with some buddies and go in a river or a lake or something like that. This time of year, phenomenal way to just sort of prime. Remember your daughters, when they were younger, they had all that fat on the back of the scapula. Yeah. That's the brown fat, and that would help them stay warm and things like that. And
we lose it as
it's there, but it's atrophied in a lot of people. And that has what's called metabolic consequences in the form of insulin resistance and diabetes. So we can sort of awaken or prime that dormant fat by just being more intentional about getting cold on purpose.
That one's a challenge, my friend, especially in the morning. And I'd done it for good periods of time and then found it refreshing and enjoyable once I got into it. My brother found huge benefits from cold plunges for over a year. I don't think he missed one for a year as an experiment. And it just got to a point where it just was really enjoyable. For me, I did it for months and months. Never got enjoyable, really. It was always a struggle. I was always like, it's always cold. But it did make me master some self-discipline. It did help me breathe. Like, part of being in there is your whole body's screaming, get out, get out. And here you're telling it, no, deal with it, and it's a process. And then the panic, the chill, but the breathing comes into play. And I got better and better at it. It's funny how I naturally wanted to just focus on breathing when I am that cold. Then you have to think, it just came. It just did it. And I think Wim Hof said that's how he discovered breathing, was being cold and then dealing with the cold through the breath, Kind of interesting. I don't know what all is happening there.
I mean, there's so many different facets to it, but I think the biggest thing is, like you said, the breath and the moving blood around. So when you get cold, everything's going to the core.
How much of it is adrenaline?
Part of that, I don't know how significant. I mean, I think stalking an animal is going to be orders of magnitude more adrenaline. True. But yeah, part of that is that norepinephrine, which is epinephrine and norepinephrine are related hormones. But I think the big part, especially as we age, is going to be just moving blood and lymph. Because what happens is we sit in our cars, we sit at our desk, we're stagnant, and when you're getting cold, you're shunting all the blood back to the core. It's just a natural physiologic response. And then when you warm up, all the blood is and lymph is returning. So it's just moving stagnant fluids.
I see. Exercise will do that.
Exactly, 100%.
But what does a cold do that's a little bit different, would you say?
Well, it's activating that brown fat. It's causing that what happens is not, the magic happens after the fact, because as a response, as an adaptation to exercise, you're causing micro damage, and then your muscles repair and they get bigger and stronger. As an adaptation to getting cold, your body's like, oh, that sucked. So what we're going to do is we're going to take these white fat cells and make them behave like the brown fat that our children used to have. And so the mitochondria get enriched, and there's all these different metabolic processes so that you're able to tolerate that during the next session better.
So what about this? So right now, I go for my runs, I do my burpees, I do my handstand walks and push-ups and stuff, and I'll get on the bar and I'll do some squats and deadlifts and so on. Love it. hour gone by, feeling good. I do some soft tissue work, some rolling, some stretching, cool down, and I jump in an ice cold pool, or I fill the tub with ice cold water, get in, and I sit there for about 5 minutes, sometimes longer. I don't mind getting in after an intense workout. Like, I like it. I get in, and I definitely feel afterward. I feel the stress goes away, like goes way down compared to post-workout. Normally, I feel amped, but after a cold bath, about 10 minutes later, I feel calm. That it sort of short circuits this cortisol spike I get. So I like to do it. Doing it in the morning, getting up I can certainly see how that would wake me up better probably than caffeine or something. But there's no drive for it like there is post-workout.
Right.
What about using it as just a workout recovery tool? What does it do? Because, I mean, I see a lot of guys climb right into an ice bath or whatever after they work out. What's your take on that?
Well, it depends. Like for me, and we were talking about this morning, muscle mass and preserving muscle mass and maintaining that throughout your lifespan is very important for longevity. The downside about doing the cold baths immediately after exercise is it does block this process that is needed to maintain muscle mass called muscle protein synthesis. So we see the NFL, and if you're in 2-a-day football camp or something, or you do a very hard CrossFit workout, it makes a lot more sense to go in the ice bath right away. But if you're trying to build muscle, I would even say do it before or separate it a little bit.
If you're doing performance stuff where you're in a race or whatever, like hit it now. But if you're in a building phase, you're just trying to get in better shape, then maybe
give it a little time after. Now, here's the thing. Do it when you can, right? If that's your only time. But for you, I probably wouldn't recommend 5 minutes after a hypertrophy workout.
Okay.
Maybe you get in for 20 seconds for that mental grit, and then you could do it later in the day for more of a prolonged session. Maybe before dinner, for example, because getting cold, it does decrease that glucose. So before you had maybe pasta or rice or whatever, it could be a tool.
Interesting.
And so I personally do it just in the morning for the mental grit. It's like my little trade-off. I don't allow myself to have coffee until I do a cold bath. And it's 30 seconds. It's not an hour, It's just more mental because it sucks. I don't want to do it, but man, I feel so good after. And that's how I feel after I send an email to an important customer or whatever later in the day. So it's just starting the day off with a little bit of discipline.
Well, Mike, we have some more festivities to get to here soon.
We do.
It's the last day of the Western Hunting Summit, which has been epic. I love these get-togethers. It's so great to have community like this. You meet people. I was fortunate enough to be at all 3 of the summits this year, and everybody I meet is just a Class A human being who loves to do what we love to do and are very focused on healthy living and living a better life, getting outside, and the camp is empowering.
Yeah.
You learn from freeze-dried foods and digital maps to handling a weapon under pressure, shooting technique, like all of it. It's all there, and it's just awesome. A great camp. Where can people find you, Mike? They want to get into more information. Tell us about your YouTube channel.
Sure. Yeah. So highintensityhealth.com, that's my website. The YouTube channel, High Intensity Health. And then that's the iTunes podcast if people are interested. And just leave a comment on a video and let them know that.
People that are tuning in and they want to get a taste of your work and kind of what you've done, what are a couple of videos titles that really stand out to people or that are maybe your most viewed?
Yeah. Some of the fasting videos that I've done with Jason Fung and other people would be good to start with. Recent blood viscosity, recent in the last year. So if you go on a desktop and you view anyone's YouTube page, you can search within that channel. Yeah. So I often do that with your videos too. I'll type in mule deer or something. You can see those specific videos. So that would be helpful. And then if people are interested in diving into the whole sleep taping and sleep stuff, I work with a friend of mine, Mark Brehenna. He's a dentist, but he's really big into sleep. And so those videos would be helpful too, so people can understand the mechanisms behind it and hear from an expert who's been recommending mouth taping and nasal breathing for a long time. So yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's fun.
Okay, folks, check it out. And then Instagram, you're there too.
Yeah, metabolic. That's the only one that's different. Metabolic_Mike.
And I'll put links to all of this stuff in the description field of this YouTube video. So anybody listening on Apple, Spotify, head over to the Gritty YouTube channel. And when you find Mike's video, you'll see the links down there as well. Thanks, Mike.
Awesome, brother.
Appreciate
Thanks
it,
for
man.
having me. This was fun.
Yep. Folks, thanks for tuning in. And stay gritty.